Hey, what's up everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast for a very special episode. Why is this episode special? Because this marks the 100th episode of the In a Crowded Room podcast, which I promise you, although we're going to get serious first, we're going to talk about the flattening of the coronavirus and all the weird stuff that's going on right now. I don't know if you've been watching, but I haven't. There's some weird stuff going on right now. But that's just the beginning of this episode. We will end this episode with I guess you can call it a series review, but more of a comparison dialogue about the Tiger King and the similarities of the world of the Tiger King and the paranormal field, which I was shocked by how many similarities there were. What am I talking about? We'll get to that in a little while. But first off, I just want to say thank you to all of you. We have gained nearly 10,000 subscribers since this podcast began. I wanted to do something different when it first began. I told you guys I wanted to make something that was more of a storytelling podcast, which is why I didn't want to put the camera on my face and do the whole hey everybody, I'm having a great day, so you should be, the type of editing and all this stuff that so many of these vloggers do for their podcasts. And I also didn't want to do the Joe Rogan thing where it's like, look how many famous people I know and sit across from those people. I wanted to do something that was kind of in honor of Paul Harvey, a storyteller's podcast, where I would pick certain topics that, were interesting to me. And if they related to my life, if they related to an experience that I had, I would share that experience with you. And when this first began, I knew it would take a while to catch on because we live in a visual world. People just are used to seeing visuals and vlog-style podcasts, and I remember when podcasts very first came out, and Adam Curry actually did the very first podcast ever, and I actually remember listening to it. It was just pure audio. It was just a guy sharing his thoughts about, in Adam Curry's case, about music and tech. But when it came to Paul Harvey, that was just a real special time when I was a child. I think I mentioned this before, but my parents were into Paul Harvey, and he would tell these incredible stories. And he had this very slow patter to the way he would speak and very long pauses. And that's something that I naturally do as a storyteller. I don't plan that. I don't sit and try to speak slow and have long pauses between words. That actually happens just because I'm thinking as I'm talking. When I tell a story that I care about, as I'm telling it to you, I'm also kind of reliving it at the same time, if that makes sense. So that's why at times there's a bit of a pause, in my speaking. Also, if I do still have this tiny little lisp, hopefully my dentist office will open back up soon and I can get the crown, to my dental procedure, to my implant finally. If you haven't noticed it, good, don't notice it. Again, I'm very hyper aware of everything about my voice. When I do a podcast, that is just a voice. But anyways, I knew when I started this that it would take a while to catch on. A podcast in today's world that's just pure audio with no visuals and just one guy talking about the world and sharing his stories. But because Paul Harvey proved to me that it could be done, I felt like, rather than follow the trend, which I'm not good at, I don't follow trends well, rather than follow the trend of the Joe Rogan format. I'm not saying anything bad about Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is actually incredible at what he does. And, but the whole let me talk to famous people and get their thoughts. I mean, like everybody and their brother does that. And I don't know that anybody's bringing anything new to the table by, copying the Rogan format. And Rogan also just, does like these 4 or 5 hour podcasts. And I'm not into that. You guys have shit you're doing, man. So do I. I don't assume anybody has 4 hours to sit around and listen to me talk. So I always wanted to keep it between 20 minutes and like an hour. That's kind of, where my format, resides. And I was surprised by how many of you, were leaving these very positive messages, stating not just that you enjoyed it, but that, you counted on new episodes and you really enjoyed it. And it was, a couple of you have left messages stating that you have in a crowded room listening parties, which is mind blowing to me. That's incredible. And the interaction has been so fun. You guys leave the best comments and really long thought out comments, which I love. I cannot stand that we live in a world that people bitch about, things being too long. I was in a creative meeting last week with a television station. I'm not going to say who they are, but they were kind of bitching about how wordy I am. And I remember thinking, the thing that I wrote, I was describing a very powerful event in my life. And I wrote something about it that was no longer than a page, 1 page. And they were like, this is so long. We got to get this down. We got to knock this down. And I was thinking, this is long? 1 page to sum up a powerful and emotional event. And this is long. And it's because we live in a world where anything beyond 140 characters is considered long. And I can't stand that shit, and I cannot stand someone saying to cut something down for the sake of making it short. So I love that you guys leave very long comments. That's become a bit of a hallmark to the In a Crowded Room podcast, that my fans are very intelligent, and you guys have well thought out opinions, and you like to express them in great detail. And I want to urge you to continue to do so. I am not looking for you guys to sum up your thoughts in less than 140 characters. It's okay if I have to read a few paragraphs. I'm an educated man. I'm literate. I can handle that. But that's been a really cool hallmark of the show is you guys. The feedback has been incredible. You guys have done an amazing job of spreading the word. As you guys know, I've showed it over and over again. It doesn't matter what my episode is about. I am getting tagged by YouTube immediately and demonetized, and I don't know why. Every time I send it in for a manual review, every time I'm told, yep, it violates our user standards, and I don't know how. I rarely ever swear. I don't talk about any of the content that they don't want to talk about. When we talk about the Tiger King, it'll be the first time that I actually speak a little bit about sex, because sexuality is, prevalent in that series. But rarely, as you guys know, you'll very rarely ever hear me speak about anything sexual. I don't, I don't know. I don't know why, like, as you guys saw, they demonetized me on like 4 episodes in a row about the coronavirus. About the coronavirus. And 2 of the episodes were just literally about how I'm doing, and demonetized. It violates their standards. I cannot tell the world how I'm doing. So, no, I don't make any money off this podcast. And ultimately, that's fine. If YouTube doesn't want to pay me and they want to, hide my words from the world, the only way to beat that is for you guys to tell people about the podcast and to share it on your Facebook pages and your YouTube pages and your Instagram pages and your Twitters. And I just want to urge you to keep doing that. Also, down below, you will see the donation link. I'm putting it back up for the 100th episode. So if you guys would like to leave me a donation for the celebration of the 100th episode, that would mean a lot to me. Unfortunately, I had to take a break earlier to finish up a film and to focus on a few of the things that, keep the lights on. But I am hopeful that one day this podcast can contribute to keeping the lights on. But we'll have to do it in ways that other people don't get to enjoy. I guess my words, YouTube deems my words to be either dangerous or, I'm not worthy of their advertisers, which is fine with me. And you guys have done that, so I wanted to thank you. You've been supportive of me. So, like I said, for this episode, I'll put the donation link up below. If you can help me, that would be great. Outside of that, guys, I just wanted to thank you all for being, a place for me to come, to have fun. The main reason that I started this podcast is that I just love storytelling. At the heart of what I do, I am a storyteller, whether that be through, writing music and singing songs and releasing music to the world, or through, making films and documentaries and releasing those. If you follow this YouTube page, there's different videos I've released of some of my poetry as well. On my Facebook page, I often write. I'm one of the few people left, I think, that's willing to write a 10 to 20 page, kind of thesis on something that's important to me. I think writing is also a lost art. I think, if you use the English language correctly, you can paint a picture far more vivid than anything that a camera could capture. So I like to, keep my brain healthy in that department and keep my brain working out when it comes to writing as well. But when it came to the podcast, sorry, I'm still, believe it or not, I am not 100% over COVID-19 yet. Almost there, though. But when it came to the podcast, I was just looking to do something that is just so native to who I am. And talking with friends and sharing stories is something that I've always been identified by my friends. They would point out that I had a gift for it. And that goes back to as long as I could remember. When I was in high school, one of my favorite things to do on our bus rides home from playing sports and baseball and football, my team would literally ask me at times to tell stories, and they would gather around and we would start talking about something. And I loved telling stories. When I was younger, I did a lot of camping with friends and late night horror stories. I was always asked to share those stories as well. And it moved into other aspects of my life. But I was looking for something that I was just passionate about, that, hopefully could start out very small and just grow into something very special. But I wanted to keep the focus where it should be, which is just passion. And I love discussing my thoughts, and I love storytelling and sharing those with you. So I want to thank you for being that place for me. Okay? So having said that, guys, let's get into it. As you guys know, as I just mentioned, I am about 95% recovered from COVID-19, in which I've spoken at length about all of the bizarre things going on with this entire lockdown. For example, when this whole thing began, the earliest number that we heard was that there may be 2 million Americans that could potentially die from COVID-19. And when that was the number, I understood the lockdown. I was like, whoa, that is a big number. 2 million? I'm just thinking, Jesus. I mean, I guess I can always compare it to Vietnam. For some reason, I always remember that in Vietnam, we lost 55,000 people, because that number, when I first learned of that number, that just seemed so big to me, because I remember going to a football game in Lincoln, Nebraska one time, and they said there was 55,000 people there. And I remember how many people that was. It was just huge. That number is ridiculous. So the thought of 55,000 people dying, that was a big number. So when I heard 2 million, I'm like, that's a real big number. Holy cow. And then suddenly that number kind of went away. And about 2 weeks ago, the number changed to, it could be 100,000 to 250,000. And I still remember thinking that's still a hefty number. But then I learned that the flu, kills somewhere between 40 to 60,000 a year, the standard flu. And then I started kind of wondering what was going on. Like, 100 to 200,000 people, if that's the number, that's bad. Don't get me wrong. I've already said that's a terrible number. That is so many people. But, I was like, I shutting down everything and throwing so many people's lives, into financial despair over what basically would amount to a slightly more deadly flu bug. I was I was admittedly kind of in the gray area about that. And I voiced that opinion, on the podcast. I said the whole time that my greater fear was civil unrest. What are people supposed to do when they don't have the money to pay their rent? They don't have the money to eat. And now if you throw on top of that they lost a loved one, a mother, a grandma, a wife, a sister, brother, anybody that you care about, things could go south real fast. And we don't got to go back down that road again. I've given my opinion on that extensively. But then I woke up this morning because I don't know if you guys have been watching, but something really weird has happened over the last 72 hours. 72 hours ago, we were being told we need to be prepared because the next 2 weeks are going to get brutal. That there's going to be a death toll that, is going to be ugly. In fact, the Surgeon General for the United States, I watched him on television as he said, the next 2 weeks will probably be the worst day of Americans' lives ever. Like each day will be a new worst day of American lives. That's how he explained it. He said each day is going to be a new worst day ever. And again, I was like, okay, well shit, let's get prepared for it then. And Trump did not like that. Trump did not like that. He was going back and forth with Fauci. About 72 hours ago, that was the message. Get ready. It is going to be horrific. And Trump did not like it. He was coming back on and he was saying, no, listen, we just bought, millions and millions of the malaria medication, the hydrochloroquine. And he's saying, it's anecdotal evidence, but there's been great evidence suggesting that it works. And then Fauci would argue with him. But Trump you could tell he was done with this. He wanted things to open back up on Easter. And he was talked down from it. And it's like you could see it on Trump's face. One of the things that I do like about him, and it's the same thing I guess I don't like about him too, is he's not really a poker player, You could see what he wants and what he feels 10 miles away, His tell is everything. You know what I mean? Like his tell, like you can tell how he's feeling by something he does. His tell is everything. You can just see what he wants. And you can see that he's done with this, let things, just come to a standstill as lives, become more and more unsavable. There's no question that it's horrific that people are dying. There's no question that it's sad. There's no question that it's unspeakable. As you guys know, my father's in a position where he could lose his life to COVID-19. And, let's not even go there. But the point being is, it's very, it's very serious, and we all know that. We all know it's very serious. But my question the whole time was, is it serious no matter what we do? Meaning, did we get to this too late? Because I think we did. I think we got to this way late. Okay? Well, it came out about 3 days ago that there were, documents written up, and there were warnings given to Trump and, his office and his circle back in November, warning of this. Now, I'm not going to, sit here and go, oh, this is all Trump's fault. It's not, and I'll tell you what's also getting really tiresome. And I'm not necessarily a Trump supporter per se, but what I am getting tired of is, no matter what the situation is, the left, especially the left-leaning media, just everything is about proving that Trump is the problem. And to the point where I can't even watch MSNBC anymore, because I'm just like, guys, can I just get the fucking news? Can I not hear about how every single thing on planet Earth is Trump's fault? When we elected Trump as a nation to be our president, I did not believe or think for a second we were electing Jesus Christ. This is a man. This is a man, and he's going to make mistakes, especially when there's, unprecedented events are going on. So to the left-leaning media, can we just chill for a minute? Can you guys go after him again once this is all over? Because it's really, really blurring up an already blurry picture, But my point being is, we learned that in November, this was known, that this was a pandemic that could become cataclysmic. Well, that means in November, if they knew of it and they were, warning of it then, and if planes were stopped coming from China in January, then that means between November and January, at some point, it was already here. And, my question is the lockdown working or not? Because if it's already here and it's already went through most of the population that it's going to go through, then what we're doing is, we're sitting at home and we're destroying people's lives financially for what is going to happen inevitably. Inevitably, there's a word for you. So that was kind of like my fear is once the virus does its thing, how many lives will be destroyed to the financial implications of completely shutting down an entire country. Well, I heard something this morning that just shocked me, absolutely shocked me. Because 3 days ago, I also heard Americans need to do a better job. They need to do a better job of social distancing. They're just not doing it. People aren't listening. There were beaches with huge parties in Florida, and nobody's listening. And then all of a sudden you hear, hey, we're all doing an incredible job. And now the number of 240,000 down to 100,000 has been reduced. And as of this morning, they were saying, we think the total number of dead may only be 60,000. Now, if that doesn't make you scratch your head, it should, because the number of natural deaths that occur per year due to the flu is 40 to 60,000. So did we create a global financial recession over what amounts to the flu? And there's all kinds of really basic questions that these are not stupid questions. A lot of people said, well, right now there's also a natural number of people that are dying from the flu, the normal flu. There's also people that are dying from pneumonia. There are people that are dying from, allergies and symptoms brought on by colds. And then there's just people that are dying from natural causes. How do you know when someone comes in, what is COVID-19 versus what is a natural reason that somebody else would die? It's a very good question. And I heard Fauci today, he was asked that by the press that basically just said, how do you know? And he fought back and he's like, well, we know because we're medical professionals and we could tell you what somebody has and what they don't have, by their symptoms. Well, but no, hold on. The symptoms to, strep throat, are pretty similar to COVID-19. I could tell you the one major difference that I experienced that was super weird was the loss of taste and smell. That was a big indicator that was strange, and the body fevers. That was super weird. That was definitely different than anything else I've experienced, and that was a dead giveaway. But that's a person experiencing that. That's not a doctor saying that person came in here and he was having a hard time breathing and he died, so he had to have had COVID-19. I don't know. I mean, if a person dies on their way to the hospital, is there a way to test a dead person for COVID-19? And how many people are dying at home? I just feel like there's no real way of calculating this. And maybe the number is much higher, and we've already been through a lot of those deaths. Or maybe it's much lower. Here's what's weird. I was thinking about this the other day too. On the 15th is when they did the lockdown, okay? And in the days following the 15th, suddenly, because of the lockdown, the hospitals were overblown. But the hospitals weren't overblown on the 14th. They weren't overblown on the 14th. Throughout the country. At least I never heard it. I was living in LA. I never heard, hey, there's a 7-hour wait at the hospital, But once they said COVID-19 is here, it is killing people dead as a doornail, lockdown. Then we start hearing, oh, the hospitals are overblown. There's not enough ventilators. And mind you, I think that's because anybody with any medical condition whatsoever that felt any kind of terrible way rushed to the hospital. And then I spent some more time today researching, even more information about where we're at today. Now remember, 72 hours ago, we were preparing for what would be the worst day of our life, knowing that we would wake up again the next day, and that would be the worst day of our life. This is according to the Surgeon General, 72 hours ago. And then today, we're waking up to hear, you guys have kicked so much ass, and now only 60,000 people are going to die, and we're flattening the curve, everybody. Now, this just so happens to happen on the weekend that Trump wanted to reopen everything. Okay, so how did we go from Armageddon's coming 3 days ago to now we're flattening the curve, everybody, only 60,000 people are going to die? Do you see what I'm saying? Something really weird is going on right now. Something really weird. So then I start digging into this even more, and there is some information now that is pretty determined, pretty defined. And here's the information here. First off, if you're a female, most females are experiencing a very, very mild version of COVID-19. For some reason, it does not affect females as hard as it does males. In fact, 70% of those who have passed away from COVID-19, 70% have been male. But here's the numbers that kind of freaked me out and had me scratching my head again as to why, we shut down the world and created this global recession. 80% of those infected with COVID-19, 80%, regardless of the age, 80% will experience mild to no symptoms. No, meaning there are people that have gotten COVID-19 and didn't experience anything. Nothing. At least not reportable. So they were walking around infecting how many people, not even knowing that they had it. And this goes from nothing to mild. So 80% of those who got it experienced nothing to mild symptoms. All right. Now, in this top 20%, the remaining 20%, 15 to 18% experienced medium symptoms or more severe, meaning that they visited the hospital. Okay. So 15 to 18% were not hospitalized, but they had to visit the hospital. 3% were hospitalized and died. 3%. On average, there are some places that are more than others, but 3%. So what that means is 97% of the people, like myself, have been infected with the coronavirus. 97% were essentially fine. Now, of those 3% of people who experienced severe, I wrote all this down, guys, so I'm reading it here as I'm talking to you. You can hear my wheezing still a little bit. Of those 3% that died, 80% of that 3% that died, 80% had pre-existing conditions. They had a weakened immune system from pre-existing conditions. So if they did not, we're back down to about a fraction of a percent of people that would actually die if they had normal immune systems. So of those people in the world, if everybody was equal across the board and everybody had a strong immune system, or at least a standard immune system, a fraction of 1% of people would actually die from the coronavirus. What's interesting about that is that's the same exact numbers of the flu. Same thing. Of the normal flu, the seasonal flu, a fraction of 1% actually pass away from it, in which 40 to 60,000 people die. So how did we go from 2 million people could potentially die, pardon me, to 100,000 to 250,000 could potentially die 3 days ago, to today, 60,000. Something is not adding up, guys. Something is not adding up. And I don't have the answer. I don't know what it is. Perhaps it's Trump's will, and he's like, listen, here's the thing. I've put my finger on the calendar, and I'm telling you guys, at the end of this month, we are opening this fucking country back up, so you better start conditioning people to do it. Maybe that's what he did, and if he did. To be honest, I support that decision. I think we can't sit in our houses. This is not life, guys. We can't sit in our houses forever and not go see people, man, and not be a part of the world and life. And it's just, at some point, you have to choose a standard of life. Is a life worth living if you can't leave your damn house and you can't, engage in humanity? I mean, at some point you got to make that decision. But is that what's going on right now? Because I don't understand how we go from being scolded that we're not doing a good enough job listening and that people aren't taking it serious, to the same news channels telling us that we should pat ourselves on the back for doing such a great job of social distancing, and that we're now seeing the effects of it. It doesn't make any sense. I'll tell you what also doesn't make any sense. If you look at the global picture here, so China claims that in total they had 81,000 cases of the coronavirus. Guys, how is that possible? Okay, New York alone. In New York, there's 159,000 confirmed cases in the city of New York. So how does the city of New York have more coronavirus cases than all of China? Well, obviously, either China's lying or our numbers are grossly inflated. One of the two. And I think China's probably lying. And why aren't we hearing of ridiculous numbers of coronavirus ripping through like Africa? I looked forever and I couldn't even find a statistic on Africa for about an hour until I finally found it on some small nowhere website that said throughout the entire country of Africa, there's only been 10,000 confirmed cases. How is that possible? How is it possible that New York has 160,000 in Africa, which is a cesspool for disease because they don't have the proper medical infrastructure there? How does Africa only have 10,000 cases? How has Africa stopped this from spreading? What have they done that's so magical? I'm just realizing that none of these numbers are real. 160,000 cases in New York. It's either way more or way less. China, 81,000. Come on. It supposedly started there. There's billions of people there. 81,000, that's a lie. 10,000 in Africa, again, it either doesn't exist in Africa or it's way more than that. So why is the truth so difficult to find? Why is the truth so difficult to find right now? And how can we determine which city in America, is having a COVID-19 outbreak when a week ago there were not enough tests for New York? When 2.5 weeks ago, when I called the hospital sick as a dog, they told me, unless you think you're going to die, don't come in because we ain't got tests. We need the tests for the elderly and for the young. So, I don't want to keep going on this because I don't want to spend forever of the 100th episode on this, but we need to really keep our eyes open right now because there is some dirty pool being shot right now, guys. There's some sketchy shit going on. None of these numbers make sense. The message, which has really been freaking me out, you guys have probably heard this when I say this, a new normal. I've heard everybody from Cuomo to Trump to they're all singing the same song, which is there isn't a going back to how things were. There's a moving forward to the new normal. I saw Fauci today suggesting that maybe shaking hands should become a thing of the past. I'm like, what? It's just weird. This whole a new normal. I've heard, if you flip through your news stations, go flip through them and listen for a while. Somebody will say it. Everybody's asking, how do things go? When do things go back to how they were? They're not going to. It's about moving forward and a new normal. Well, why can't they go back to how they were? Because a flu bug killed the same amount of people as the flu? I'm just, and I hate to be this guy that just, screams conspiracy, but a conspiracy is when a group of people disseminate information that's incorrect, and they do it intentionally. And that's what's going on right now, because none of these numbers make sense. They just don't make sense. 3 days ago, they were saying 200,000 more people were going to die than what they're saying today. 3 days ago, we were doing a terrible job of social distancing. Today, we're heroes. And I just want to mention this. If you've been following on my Facebook page, there's been some really bizarre tweets lately that have come out. The CIA on April 1st, which at first I thought maybe this is an April Fool's Day tweet. The CIA released this tweet saying that during your lockdown, you should use that time to your benefit to study UFO cases. In fact, they listed their top 10 UFO cases, and beyond that, they listed their top 10 steps, their protocol for documenting and reporting UFO cases. Now, someone said, is that an April Fool's thing? Well, it could have been, I guess, but here's the thing. There was no joke. There was no joke set up. There was no joke delivery. There was no post April Fools. Like, after that, it was very serious. It was like, this is what you should do. They used the hashtag, stay home. And the amount of information they gave was exorbitant. The case information was really cool. They're known cases. Like, there was no joke. There was no joke. There was no setup, delivery, or payoff. It was just the CIA wants you to investigate UFOs. Now think about how weird that is, guys. Forever, the government stance has been, if you believe in UFOs, you're a tinfoil hat conspiracy weirdo. You're a joke. You should be made fun of and ridiculed. Forever, that was the government stance. Forever. But not this year. Not since December 17th, 2019, when they released all 3 of those videos. Now it's, when you're at home during the lockdown, you should use this time to study up on UFOs and to learn the protocol for reporting them and documenting them. Now, why would the CIA want everybody, who was at home during the lockdown? Why would the CIA want the country to study their 10 steps for reporting UFO sightings? Why? Because these things aren't random. There's not like some, 12-year-old kid that has the CIA's Twitter handle in the corner and he's just, flipping coins and decided, oh, fuck it, let's write about this. No, there's thought that goes into this stuff. There's a reason why this stuff is out there. None of it is accidental. None of it's accidental. And if that isn't weird enough for you, on March 20th, Tom DeLonge sent out a tweet. Literally, and he was dead serious, sent out a tweet informing everybody that if all the worlds came together, if all the countries in the world came together, we would have $1 trillion of money to invest in, schools and whatever, by eliminating the military. Because if everybody was under the rule of one leader, all these countries could eliminate their militaries. There would only be one military. And he says in this tweet, and you can visit my Facebook page or just Google it. Google, Tom DeLonge's New World Order, because at the end of the tweet he says, wouldn't you like a larger family? But read the tweet; it's super spooky. He eventually took this down because people just lit him up like a Christmas tree. And people responding the same way I would respond, which is no. Because in order to do that, we'd have to tear up our Constitution. And so who's going to change? Does the rest of the world live in a free democracy, or do I have to live under a communist dictator? You know what I mean? It's like, what are we talking about? No, people are different. People are different. And this is, throughout the world. And there's different governments and there's different systems. And, it all works because people are different. And the idea of one person leading the planet, guys, this has been tried throughout history, from Alexander the Great to Genghis Khan to Hitler. We've seen the type of person who wants that job, right? There's never been a leader that tried to take over the world that was just a swell guy. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's what we've seen. If someone says, I want to lead the planet, they are a power-hungry sociopath. That's who wants to lead the planet. That's who wants to be king of planet Earth. So as we move into this corner here, if that's what we're turning with COVID-19, now is a time where we really, really need to keep our eyes open. Because the one thing I'm certain of is none of this was an accident. None of it was an accident. And now we're at a place where, with most conspiracy theories, the holes in the story begin to reveal themselves. And things are not making sense right now. Something isn't right. Something isn't right about all of this. Now, before we move on here to talk about the similarities of the paranormal field and the inner workings of the paranormal field and the similarities to the world that was unveiled in the Tiger King documentary series on Netflix, I just wanted to thank you guys again, because the last 2 episodes I have made exclusive offers for my films to just you as listeners of my podcast, as a way to say thank you. And of course, with my 100th episode, I want to do that again. At the very bottom of the description box, if you just scroll down, it's just hidden, so you know where it's at by listening. And if you listen to the first hour of this podcast, you'll now discover this. Down there, you will see a link. And it is similar to last week's offer, but I added something. And that is, you can watch for the next 60 days all 20 of my documentaries on Vimeo on demand for $39.99. Plus, I am throwing on that the 11-episode, almost 13-hour special podcast series for American Ghost Hunter, which, if you've heard my special podcast series, you know that they are more like an audiobook than they are a podcast. If you've seen American Ghost Hunter and you know about my life story, or think you do, trust me, you don't know the whole story. In that American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details special podcast series, I outline everything from what sent us to Iowa and my entire experience from the age of 10 up until the day I left for college. It's really a good listen, and it's something that I truly enjoy doing. So I'm including that as well. So if you click the link below, it'll just say, click here to order Chad's 100th episode special offer. That includes all 20 films of mine on Vimeo On Demand. You'll have complete access for the next 60 days, plus the entire 11-episode American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details special podcast series for $39.99. Available to just you, as you're the only one that knows about this offer, and you're the only one that knows where the purchase link exists. Having said that, let's get into it, guys. I promised that I would end this episode off with something more uplifting than the flattening of the truth curve with the coronavirus. And I got to tell you, I heard about this series. Everybody I was running into kept telling me, dude, have you seen The Tiger King? Have you seen The Tiger King? If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. This will be a huge spoiler alert for you, so just know that. But in a nutshell, The Tiger King is a documentary series about a guy named Joe Exotic, a girl named Carol Baskin, and another gentleman named Bhagavan van Antel, if I said that right. Bhagavan, as in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan van Antel. And they are basically... They're 3 owners of privately owned big cats, lion zoos, tiger zoos. And they each do their thing a little bit differently, but they're all at war with each other. They're all at war as to who does what right, who deserves what donation money, who should have their place shut down because... it's not up to par, who is cruel to their animals and who's not, who, has the better, zoo that they can go to, who is basically just in their operation, who truly loves the cats. But it's all centered around this Joe Exotic gentleman. Now, when I first saw it, this Joe Exotic guy, there's a charm to him that is extremely likable, even though he's extremely eccentric. And as the documentary series goes, he begins to lose a lot of that charm, and I'll explain why. But in a nutshell, he is in Oklahoma, very much has kind of that southern ass kicker type of swag, but he is a gay man. He is a gay man with 2 husbands that, for all intents and purposes, outside of being with him, appear to be straight. But they are his gay husbands. And what's really interesting is right across the way in South Carolina, you have Bhagavan Van Antel, who the series claims that he has somewhere between 5 and maybe as high as 9 wives who began working at his big cat establishment when they were teens, and when they grew up, they became his wives. And now you have this Carol Baskins, who's the kind of the bad guy of the whole series. She's who is trying to take out Joe Exotic and Bhagavan Van Antel, but more so Joe. And Carol Baskin's story is pretty crazy because she got married to a man who was very wealthy, and eventually this guy just disappears one day, and to this day he's not been found. And all obvious signs kind of hint at the fact that she was somehow involved in his murder and or his disappearance, sorry, which people believe is a murder. And she is now the inheritor of his will. But right away, the one thing that's very obvious throughout this whole thing is that sexuality at these places, is extremely liberal, to the point where it almost seems freakish at times. And I say freakish, not even bad, just like would freak people out is what I'm trying to say. There's these photos that Joe, who has got to be in his 50s, and his husbands are got to be in their mid-20s, I would assume. There's these photos of them out in a field of Joe and his youngest-looking husband both hugging each other, and the third husband, literally on his knees below him. And then obviously this Bhagavan Van Antel is very eccentric as well. Everyone talks about his charm, and that's the guy with multiple wives, and they're all very kind of proud about their sexuality. And guys, it just reminded me, when I first got into the paranormal field, I started going to darkness radio events. That was kind of my entrance into the inner workings of the paranormal community, meaning the televised paranormal community. Everybody who was on a show basically would go to these events. And I had just put out the trailer to Paranormal, and that thing took off like wildfire, just viral as hell. That's how I actually met Ryan Buell, was through Paranormal. And I remember right after I put out the trailer to Paranormal, I was invited to the Queen Mary for a darkness radio event. I mean, everybody who was on a paranormal TV show in the past or present at that time was there. And it just reminded me of my days when I was in a metal band that was touring, which is to say that, how can I put this politely? It was extremely liberal, and it was married couples. It was very normal, for married couples to be having wide open relationships with other couples. And let me say this: I'm completely cool with all of that stuff, man. I believe that real relationships are of the heart, not the body. And whatever any adult wants to do with anybody else, if it works for them, that's cool, man. And the reason I bring this up and why it's interesting is because when you watch it on TV, when you watch like Joe Exotic and his husbands, and there's almost like this king worship that he has from his community. And the same thing with Bhagavan Van Antal and his the women that are in his life. And it's because power and talent, those two things are sexy, period. In the music business, I mean, the reason why groupies exist and why it's so overtly sexual, at live events and tours and stuff, is because when you watch somebody, perform, and if they're really good, there is a certain degree of confidence that is attractive. Alexis Bassett, she was a singer for this band, Smack Dab. And Alexis, if you're listening, I love you, sweetheart. Alexis is a good friend of mine. And, when I first met Alexis, she was beautiful, beautiful girl. And there's no denying that. Any guy would look at her and say, yes, she's a beautiful girl. And then she got up and she sang for this metal band called Smack Dab. And I am telling you, when that girl started singing and doing her thing, I mean, I'm just sitting there going, my God. And suddenly I understood what women see in men who perform and, play music. It's just, there's a confidence to it. There's a magic to it. It's just, you create a new world inside that room, that venue, and the person with the most power and the most confidence, they set the rules as to how things are going to go that night. And the same way, if there's a guy on stage and he has the attention of all these women and he decides, he wants to be with them, if he wants to sleep with them, he's going to set the guidelines. And now those guidelines are either going to be accepted by those women or they're going to leave. And more often than not, they're accepted. It's the same thing with the Tiger King. If you're into big cats and you're into that thing, and trust me, for every, niche thing out there, there are loyalists. There are people who live and die by, their passion for big cats. So these people that show up to Joe Exotic's place, and he is giving these walking tours and he's performing. And this Joe Exotic, by the way, he has country music albums out. He has music videos out. He has his own clothing lines. He gives away, right when people show up, he gives away condoms with his name on it. He used to do magic. He used to perform magic. So these people that show up to work for him, he gives these people jobs. They show up, they fall in love with the cats, they fall in love with the exoticness of this bizarre life. If you work for him, they all live in these like campers. So there's a community that's established there. And within that community, he is the king. He is the guy demonstrating, quote, talent, as he's performing for the crowds that come. He's the guy that provides checks for people. He's the guy that owns the cats. He's the guy that walks around with the most confidence. And just like at a music concert, he sets down the guidelines. So if he says, in this community, this is okay, this is favorable behavior, people will either accept it or they will leave. And do I find it interesting that two straight guys, in order to be number 2 and number 3 on the power scale, would be willing to do whatever Joe Exotic wanted sexually to basically be, higher ups in that community? No, I'm not surprised at all. I've known many straight guys that were willing to do, gay sexual acts with gay men if it meant furthering, their career or giving them something that makes them feel powerful and it makes them feel advanced. And in this world, this niche world of big cats, Joe at his facility, the GW Zoo, he is the man, and he sets the guidelines and he creates the world, and the people who are fascinated by it, they will follow his guidelines. And that's where you get these, wide open sexual relationships that are just, out there for the world to see. And everyone's like, wow, this is so strange. This 55-year-old guy has 2 of these very good looking young straight men who are actually gay, but just for him. And it was no different than when I was going to the paranormal shows, the Darkness Radio shows. I'm not picking on Darkness Radio because it's all, shows of this magnitude that I've been to with all of these TV stars. You have your stars who are the top draws there, and people that are into that niche and that world within that weekend. It was an all encompassing weekend where people would pay like $400, and they would be there with all these stars the whole time, and the guys that have the biggest TV shows and the highest ratings, and the guys that have the tickets that cost the most. In that microcosmic world, they're the kings. They're the kings. So they can do what they want, and they can set the guidelines. And I tell you what, guys, every time I'm in these microcosmic bubbles, it's almost like the truth of sexuality comes out. It's like, people were just not built to be monogamous. I mean, that's an unpopular statement, but man, it's just true. It's just, I've just seen it over and over again whenever there is a microcosmic situation where you have defined leaders of that microcosmic situation. I've just never seen it where things become very conservative. It's just the opposite. It always becomes wide open. You always have guys or women that are either defining these polygamous relationships or just wide open sexuality, period. And again, the people that are there, they can either accept it or they can dismiss it and leave. And more often than not, they accept it. Same thing with Bhagavan, I'm sorry, his name is so hard to say, Bhagavan Vanunkel and his 6-7 wives that he has. How could that many women agree to that? Well, because that's the standard he set in his microcosmic world where he runs everything, owns everything, controls paychecks, sets the laws of the place. Like, he's that guy. So if you want to be with him, that's the groundwork laid. And they choose to be okay with that because it's a power play. I mean, whether it's intentional or not, in that world, he is king. He's king. So if these women want to be with him, they lay down the law where, hey, you want to be with me? This is how I roll. Take it or leave it. More often than not, because they're, so into that world, they will roll with it. Same thing goes on in the paranormal field, guys. You would not believe. And look, I'm not going to shout out names here because what people choose to do personally is, it's their choice. But I am telling you, you would be shocked. And I say shocked, not like it's even a bad thing, because I don't believe it is. I believe anybody who knowingly agrees to get into anything, with palms up and shirts off, if everybody agrees to it, then more power to you, man. God bless you. But I am telling you that you would be very, very surprised by what happens in these circles. It's the same thing that happens when you're traveling and making a TV series. When you make like a 12-episode TV series, there's going to be 8 months of the year. 8 months of the year that you're away from home and you're traveling and living with, the same group of people. And it's exciting. You're going to new cities and you're going to new places. And, the power structure starts at the top. Whoever's the star of the show and whoever's directing the show, whoever's the executive producer of the show, and they'll define, how they want their life to be on the road. Look, almost every single film shoot that I've ever been on, they have a name in Hollywood. It's called location ships. And it was no different on Paranormal State than it was on any other show that I've ever been a part of. 70% of the crew is involved in, polygamous relationships. I would say at least 70%. Some choose, to cheat and lie to their girls. But man, a lot don't. A lot of those relationships, just like when Kobe Bryant got busted, R.I.P. Kobe. But when he got busted for having sex with that gal in Colorado, everyone was like, I cannot believe his wife is standing by him. I can't believe she's doing it. Oh my God, she's standing by. And tons of people were like, oh, it's all about the cash. She's just staying there for the cash. And I remember during that time going, no, I think she's standing by him because she loves him. And I had a lot of, members of my family even that were like, what are you talking about? You're full of shit. And I'm like, no, because to a person who lives under societal norms, they would view sexuality as such an important thing. That's why I remember being in high school and in college and over again watching my friends, the number one reason that they would break up and these relationships would end, it was almost always because somebody fucked somebody. And it was like, oh, well, you were my girlfriend and I had sex with another girl and you found out and now you dumped me. Or vice versa. A guy finds out that his girlfriend is... Well, if you're Kobe Bryant or if you're Tiger Woods or whoever, most of these guys, before they ever get into the relationship, they make it clear to their, their, I guess, soon-to-be wife, if they get married, they make it clear that this is how they're going to live. And they could either agree to it or not. And I know a lot of women in the paranormal field and out in other aspects of the entertainment business. I know a lot of women that prefer to have it on the table. I know a lot of women that are like, listen, if my guy loves me in his heart and he takes care of me, and if I'm his number one when we're together, and his extramarital affairs do not ever become part of my world, I would much rather know. I would much rather have it be on the table that this is what he does, and as long as it's on the table and I'm not being lied to, then I'm cool with it. And I've always understood that, because when someone cheats, it isn't the sex that hurts, it's the lie. Right? It's not the sex that hurts. It's the lie. It's that you trusted somebody that this was not going to happen, and it did. Right? So the way to get around that is to just be upfront about it. Be honest. Take away the chance for the lie to hurt. Take away the lie. Just live an honest life. Because there's a reason in all of these microcosmic situations, there's always this very, very liberal sexuality that exists. And it's because mankind is built more for that kind of a relationship than they are monogamous. Mankind is built naturally, especially with males, even more so than females. And not with all, because I know plenty of females that are perfectly happy to be in polygamous relationships. But with males almost always in a microcosmic power structure situation will go towards the side of the polygamous relationship. Or just multiple partners across the board. Meaning multiple sexual partners without any kind of heartstrings. Just that, you are my partner for that, and I think that's why you see it in the Tiger King. And the reason I bring this up is this is just such a big part of the Tiger King series, is these relationships that the guys have, because it kind of shows why they have this kind of God complex, this kind of, king of my jungle complex, because they are in a sense being worshipped. And just to finish up on the Kobe thing, when Kobe's wife stood by him, my honest view to that was, man, good for Kobe. He's got a real one. Because she knows how bad she looks. And she doesn't care. She loves him. And she's not going to leave him over that. I mean, she's going to replace how many kids they have together, 1 billion. And Kobe had been with her since he was like 16. So she's going to throw away a lifetime of amazing memories because her husband did something stupid on one night? And is that what marriage is? Marriage is when someone does something stupid, you just toss them away? Whatever happened to good times and bad? I mean, are there, asterisks? You know what I mean? It's like, I remember watching that Kobe thing and going, well, good, I expect her to, if she loves him, then stand by him, I don't think it has to do with money at all. I think that in those microcosmic worlds, the lines of what is acceptable shift. And they shift in accordance with the views of the person that is the most powerful or the person that is in the most control. And in the paranormal community, that is extremely prevalent, both on film shoots, and paranormal shoots, and but especially at events and just on the inside. Anyways, same thing with drug use. Drug use is a big issue that comes in through the Tiger King. Supposedly Joe Joe Exotic enjoys his drugs. And they basically imply that he lured both of his husbands into his life through the use of meth. And from what they show, I could see that. Is that a real sketchy way of operating? Yeah, I think so. I would think if you love somebody, you don't want them to be hooked on drugs. And if you care about them, you don't want them to be hooked on drugs. I mean, if someone wants to do drugs of any kind, I've always felt like, hey, we're all, again, palms up, shirts off, we're adults here. If you want to engage in that type of, fun and you can control it, great. Most people find that they can't. And I would think that if someone came to you with a drug problem and you use that problem against them to bring them closer to you in your life, that's pretty terrible. And they do show Joe kind of walking that path. And it's unfortunate because, again, Joe comes across as very charismatic at times, especially in the beginning. But I will kind of say the same thing, the person who, is at the top of the microcosmic world that they built, their little bubble, they define, life and what's acceptable. And you see the same thing in the paranormal community. I would tell you this right now, drug use in the paranormal community is rampant. If you think that, only a few people engaged in drug use, not at all the case. Not at all the case. Again, I'm not going to say names and point out people and try to hurt people. That's not my point in all this. My point is to say that once again, in these microcosmic worlds, those in charge set down, the rules and by which everyone has to either play, embrace, or leave. And drug use is rampant in the paranormal field. I would say, just in Paranormal State alone, behind the scenes, cast and crew, 70% was engaged in some form of drug use, at least 70%. And that's probably being conservative. There were definitely people that weren't, for sure. And you knew those people that weren't, and no one ever pushed them to do anything they didn't want to do. But those people would also be excluded from certain events, certain hangout sessions at the end of the night, certain we're going out to this bar here, like things like that, because people knew what they wanted to engage in. And you see that a lot here in, the Tiger King. Also, the competitive nature between those. The same thing exists in the paranormal community. I always thought it was hilarious how this show, for the longest time, like Jay didn't like Ryan, and I think Ryan didn't like Jay because of that, just because Jay didn't like Ryan. Which I know them both, and they were both. I thought, making, especially in their younger years, and they were both kind of bringing the paranormal community into the forefront of the public's, the public awareness, and making, the paranormal pop culture. And it was just weird because whoever had a new show, it was like that was the new guy that got attacked, And it's kind of, in the paranormal, it was like that for a while. I remember Rob Demarest had Ghost Hunter International, and the next thing I know, he's fighting with Ghost Adventures. What's the guy with the mohawk? Gosh, I always forget his name. The Ghost Adventures guy, Zach. Yeah, Rob and Zach were fighting back and forth, and for a while, Jay and Zach were fighting back and forth, and Zach and I have went back and forth on text, talking about his shows and stuff, and things got a little not a fight in any way, just we were not agreeable with each other. But the weird thing is, like, I don't have a problem with any of these dudes. It's like they're all doing their thing. Obviously, I know how I would react and how I treat my fans, and how appreciative I am of what I would do. And, I approach my business, in the paranormal community in a way that I think I should, which is to be grateful and thankful and to be appreciative And I think that, you should always, greet your fans with open arms and welcome them in and build a community with them and make those memories last. But not everybody in the paranormal community feels that way. Not everybody who has a TV show feels that way. And sometimes how we treat our fans and how we carry ourselves ends up determining who we hang out with and who we become friends with. And you see that in the Tiger King too. You have Carol Baskin, who's not interested at all in like fanfare. She's interested in money. She's interested in donations and obviously taking out Joe. And Joe is interested in being a rock star basically. And then you have Bhagavan Van Ontel, which is he seems to actually really really care about the zoo portion of it, the animals. And because they all have different interests, it's like they all miss the fact that they're all kind of doing the same thing. And they could all be helping each other. But they're at war with each other, especially this Carol Baskin and Joe Exotic. And she's like trying to take him out. Like she is literally trying to end his business. She's making up false claims of what he's doing to his animals. She's claiming that he's starving his animals, he's beating his animals, like all this stuff. And it gets pretty nasty between them. But again, it just reminded me of, in the paranormal community, you have, 10 different groups of 10 different TV shows, and none of them hang out with each other. None of them are friends unless they could, like, make a buck, but, like, outside of events or filming, like, none of them are friends. And it's just because they chose a side, and these, ego can do a lot to separate people. And for whatever reason, if someone has a paranormal show, what I've seen and experienced is that person who has the show, they feel like they can't cross the aisle and support. Rob Damaris told me that he believed part of the reason that he got fired from Ghost Hunter International is because he did an event in Philadelphia at Dannybrook with me. Now, he told me straight up he thought that was part of the reason why he got fired. Just because it looked like he crossed the line of disloyalty or something, for some reason, which is super strange. Same thing in Tiger King. If one guy works with another guy, then, they're going to receive, a backhand from the rest of the people that are involved in the community. Very, very strange. Very, very strange. But, man, I'm telling you, on the inside of the workings of these operations, you see this stuff all the time. And how, the Tiger King, what's at the crux of it all is this great conspiracy at the end, which is that eventually all of these guys that Joe Exotic had hired and had given jobs to and had manipulated into making him the king that he wants to be of his world, eventually Joe's ego gets so big and he goes after this Carol Baskin by making video after video about her and claiming that she killed her husband and, offering money to anybody who has the information as to how her husband, disappeared. He'll pay up to like $60,000 to try to put her away. And there's a series of basic legal wars that he gets in with Baskin, who has millions of dollars. And she basically bankrupts him. She takes him out until he has just nothing left because he ends up having to take on these really dirty partners that are just sketchy as hell. And before he knows it, he's signed away all his cats. He's had to sign away his zoo, everything. And he's got nothing left. So at the very end of it, with the last few $1,000s he has, he basically steals the cats that he believes are his, and he winds up in this little patch of land that he has for his cats. And we learn that before he moved, he told a guy he'd give him $5,000 to kill this Karen Baskins. Well, the guy says, I'll do it, takes his $3,000, and the guy just parties with it. Never does it. Never attempts to do it. Nothing. just steals his money. Well, this is what's crazy, man. Joe ended up getting 22 years in prison. 22 years in prison he got for giving a guy $3,000 to kill her. And the guy didn't do it. He just stole his money. Now, the reason that's crazy is he got 22 years. Tekashi 6ix9ine did the same thing. He paid his friend Kuda to shoot Chief Keef, and the guy didn't hit Chief Keef, but he fired at him. And this is on film. They know this. He admitted he snitched on him. And, Tekashi's out of jail. He did a little over a year, and he's out of jail. But Joe Exotic is doing 22 years. Now, there's a lot of people trying to get him out of jail, and they believe that sentence does not suit the crime, that he did commit a crime, but he had, I guess, waited 3 years in jail to get to court. And so a lot of people feel like the time served should have been what the sentence was. But what's really interesting is that Joe Exotic is a huge fan of Donald Trump, in which he is now asking for Trump to pardon him, which I saw yesterday in the coronavirus press conference. Trump was asked if he had seen the Tiger King yet, which he said no, and they filled him in on who Joe Exotic was, and they asked him if he would pardon him, and Trump said he would look into it. So there's a lot of people hoping that he does get pardoned, and that Trump may in fact do it. I hope he does. My takeaway from the whole series, guys, first off, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say it was like a 9.5. It was awesome. It was just an absolutely awesome series that shows what life is really like I said, on the inside of these microcosmic worlds that are built in these niche communities, whether it be, like I said, metal music or the paranormal field or big cat lovers and private zoo owners. And you just got to see life on the inside of what really goes on in those communities. And I thought the filmmakers did a really good job of just showing it as it is. And, the characters are super entertaining because they are all incredibly fucking eccentric, man. They are so eccentric. And same thing as the paranormal field, man. The first time I went to a paranormal event, I met Adam Bly, who I love, but he's a totally eccentric demonologist. Chip Coffee, if Chip isn't one of a kind, I don't know who is, There's just so many eccentric personalities. Lorraine Warren was always a personality to me that blew my mind. She was just so eccentric and unique and sweet, and she just came off as like the perfect grandma, but yet she's like this demon slayer, it's just so unique. And you see a lot of that in, the Tiger King. It was shocking to me how similar that world is to the paranormal field. But I think it's definitely worth watching. I think you guys would enjoy it. It's on Netflix. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. Let me know if you think Joe should be released from jail, and if you think it's fair that he got 22 years. And what do you guys think about the characters in that? What do you think about those eccentric lifestyles? Do you think it's, disturbing and weird, or do you think, as I do, that it's quite natural and interesting, and that we're just seeing what happens when people are allowed to kind of, create and govern their own little world, which is really what I think it all comes down to. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you have any questions for me about anything at all, please leave them in the comments. This has been an extra long, double-packed 100th episode. Thank you all for listening. Once again, if you scroll to the bottom of the description box, for $39.99, you can get all 20. You can watch all 20 of my paranormal documentaries on Vimeo On Demand for 60 days. Plus, you will also receive the 11-episode, 13-hour American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details special podcast series. Thrown on top of that, that's a whole lot of content to keep you guys busy during the rest of this lockdown. Thank you all for listening. 100 episodes. Here's to the next 100. Thank you to all of you for making this absolutely worth my time. The In a Crowded Room podcast will continue for sure, my friends. Having said that, much love, everybody. I will be back tomorrow. Enjoy your night, and I'll talk to you then. All the best.